what a concept, guys. Like building and developing the future of Pulsechain is absolutely going to be amazing in the next, like, I don't know, 8 months, year, 2 years, 4 years, 8 years from now. And there's only going to be a handful of people that are actually going to be here in about 8 years. That's going to be streaming, that's going to be delivering, that's going to be vocal, that's going to be giving educational like information about like what could be possible to accomplish together, and instead of just like this infighting, but like in the ecosystem itself, it's like working together and being transparent with one another, knowing our goals and knowing what we want to accomplish for the future, not just for ourselves but for the whole community as a whole, and understanding like hex, stake your hex. Pulsex is probably going to be outrunning Pulse in the future, just because the deflationary factor. And then knowing Inc., somebody can come in with a $500,000 and pump it 40%, and the whole ecosystem starts to pump 20, 25, 30%. And of course, people can come in and sell down the chart, but it doesn't really take a lot of money to pump this chain, guys. I just want you guys to know that.
Yeah, we saw today with like 400k, Inc done 40%, and the rest of the core's done around 30, just over 30%. So $1 million, bro. Like you're 2x in the chain with $1 million.
There's someone in our chat that thinks it was 250k.
Oh, sorry. So it was even less.
Well, no, but like maybe. I personally thought it was around 200, 250. And then there's a lot of people that was just sort of throwing the 400 number out there because they looked at the value of the wallet.
Okay, so maybe it was less.
He pushed the price up. He pushed the price up against himself of that ink bag. So when you looked at it, it was like, oh, it must have been that much. But like he pumped himself 40%. Plus, I think he already had a little bit of it. So I think it was less, like 300 maybe max. Personally, I think it was about 300. But yeah, it's just thin. Like 300, 40% pump. That's juicy.
It's just like once you understand like the potential of Pulsechain and what is actually being built here in our ecosystem.
So once the markets top out, Ethereum, but Bitcoin all top out, do you think Pulsechain will continue for a bit longer, or do you think it's going to be lights out as well?
Well, it's going to follow like ETH. Like if ETH goes to 4,000K market cap and ETH stops at that current position and moves back, I don't know, 20% from there, I believe it's going to go a little bit higher. I'm not come to my streams and you can actually look at my TA and understand where I think it's actually going to go. But if ETH does a 3x in past performance with 15x the liquidity that Pulsechain has right now, it did a 5x on ETH. So realizing that potential and that ratio and knowing just coaches ratio math, it's going to go much higher than a 5x on top of Pulsechain. It's just math and ratios. But of course, you're going to have the sellers and all that. But potentially, it's like it really doesn't need that much value into the ecosystem of Pulse or PHEX or EHEX or Inc. to actually pump the chain, because the liquidity factor with everything complements Hart's law, and you can actually see it actually happen today in the morning time, going up and also going down in the same kind of magnitude. So
you think Pulse is going to do a 5x on top of ETH, is what you're saying?
I think it's probably going to be a 8 to 10x on top of ETH, the first pump. If everybody holds the potential of anything tied to Pulsechain, Pulsex, PHEX, EHEX, Inc. Has the opportunity to have great exits but great returns, if you actually understand like what could be the potential in the future, especially if we can get like something in the top like 100, top 50 on Pulsechain, what kind of like onboarding could actually happen in the future, in the next like 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 months. for everybody here. And then understand like it doesn't really take a lot of money to actually get hex to $1. And if you actually look back at a couple tweets from me, like, I don't know, maybe a week ago, that you can actually see hex at $1 if Pulsechain goes to, I think, 0.0001. So it's like, once you actually understand those like magnitudes of the potential of like the velocity and volatility of the ecosystem, that's why I'm here to try to educate people as much as possible, and just bring a different kind of light to everybody, and not being like in the like drama, and just understand that there's so much potential here. Knowing the factors, what could be happening in the future, is ETH is going to start running, and looking at where Pulse Chain is in relationship with the chart, it's doing better than ETH, hands down. It might
What's
be
doing better than it? Sorry.
is Pulse Chain better than ETH?
You said
You said it's doing
Percentage
better than it.
wise, yes. From the bottom to the top, yes.
I'd beg to differ, Coach. I'm
Well,
gonna put. I'm gonna.
hey, look at the percentages right now.
Okay, but
I'm not at my computer. I can be.
Coach, do you know how much? If you'd sold PLS a week after launch into Ethereum, how much Ethereum you would have with 100 million PLS?
That's great, bro. But if I kept my pulse and I started speculating on anything here on Pulse Chain, I'm up a 10 million percent. So
Yeah. Okay. No, for
could I
sure.
get that on ETH, or
No,
am I
no.
only getting that on Pulse Chain?
But are we talking about PLS and the core coins, or are we talking about other things? I thought we were talking about
for the
like.
Well,
amount of risk you're
I was just
taking
saying
on.
the whole like the whole ecosystem.
Okay, yeah, that's a different story. So I thought you were talking about
That's a totally
PLS.
different story. Of course, if you sold your polls into ETH, you're much better off currently at this time. But if you wanted to play the game, especially degens and individuals that weren't like, I don't know, hex maxis or pulse chain maxis, and understand that we're on a layer one now, that there's going to be opportunities that are going to happen.
But at the end of the day, you know, we're stuck here. We do have the best community. And the one thing is our founder wants to be a goddamn legend, and he's willing to die for that.
We have all of these good people, bro, that know code and they read the post chain code, they read the hex code and all this code, and they're like, yes, this is real crypto. It checks out. It's approved by the world, you know, in the post chain community. But Solana's not, bro. They read the code and they're like, well, that's where the money's at, unfortunately. But that thing is like buggy, bro. And it hasn't crashed recently, but it'll happen again, bro. Trust me. And Bitcoin Cash, bro, like they looked into it and it's like, yes, Richard Hart is right. It has a bug. And but they're like, unfortunately, that's where the money's at also. But eventually, over time, it'll like bug. And so that's why I like Hex, bro, because it's wrapped under a consensus where it just cannot be hacked. Like it can't be hacked. You can like it just cannot be hacked.
Well, I mean, all of it, dude. I mean, Pulsechain and Pulsex are forks of, Uniswap and Ethereum, and Hex is a smart contract built on top of Ethereum. For them to fail, Ethereum won't have to fail. Period.
And so this is why, like, people saying, what are you gonna do, Christian? Like, I'm like, bro, I think worst case scenario always. Like, just get ready, man. If we make a newer low, bro, I don't want you to be crying. I don't want to hear it, man, because I've been warning you guys to save up money now.
I've already cried enough, man. I'm just waiting.
Yeah. Execute talking about how Richard Hart just talks about Pulsex, like optimistically. It's because like he knows it also, bro. Like
Well, it's
that's
the,
the
the
one, bro.
mechanics sets it up to do big numbers.
And I don't like to stress myself, bro. I just like to buy and hold, and that's it, man. I don't like to farm. I don't like to do none of that, bro. I just like to just keep it safe, and that's it, man. Like get a MetaMask, get the 12-word seed phrase, engrave it in a piece of titanium metal, put it in a time capsule, bury it outside in one of the properties that we have, and just leave it there. Ink and Pulsex, from what I see, Inc and Pulsex are the only ones that make the money. For the traders, don't trade, guys. Don't do it. But if it pumps, like sell 10% of your bag, and then when it dips, rebuy it again. But if you don't want to trade, then just hold.
Just understanding. I know you're a Pulsechain guy, Hex and all that, and I've learned about it, did some research on it, and I like the community. It's the spaces are actually funny to listen to. The people as well. I like listening to them talk because they seem very articulated with their words, and I do appreciate that. So it's refreshing.
Yeah, there's a good mix. For real, there's a good mix. You get the soap opera, you get the Jerry Springer show if you're looking for it, but you also get really, really intelligent technical people who can talk you through the blockchain knowledge and talk you through what's happening in the market. And that's what really got me adopted into the communities 5 years ago. I was on some of these spaces hearing some really intelligent professionals talk about what was happening, and that's what caught my attention for sure.
Because you're very pro Richard Hart, right?
Yeah, I do. So I guess people would probably classify me as a believer. There's a lot of negative energy going around these days, but I think anyone who's really paid attention to what Richard did between 2019 and now, there's much more evidence on the side that he's a good actor than a bad actor. And most of the negative energy is coming from a couple of key people in the community that I think are motivated by they're motivated by things outside of wanting to warn other people about what they perceive to be potentially negative things, if you know what I mean. I think that's one of the differences that drew me to Pulsechain initially, is that this is the only place where I saw what I would consider to be a true grassroots DeFi decentralized movement, as opposed to something that was paid influencer driven.
So, it's one aspect of the Pulsechain ecosystem. I believe in the court document, Pulsex, and Hex were named, where it was basically said that the SEC not only can't say it's a security, but they don't even have jurisdiction to say it's a security. So you see a guy like Richard Hart, who has an understanding of these offshore tax havens, and then creates a cryptocurrency. And then that cryptocurrency, it's kind of an anomalous situation where code is actually named as a defendant in the lawsuit. And then because the judge, along with an individual, so then the judge has to rule on all four entities, the individual, and the three software protocols. And so, or three tokens, however you want to phrase that. And so it's kind of this anomalous situation where basically software was given this jurisdictional legal clarification that almost nothing else has, and allows it to exist in a situation where it is probably, from a jurisdictional perspective, one of the most, or three of the most valuable assets in the world. And when you look at the fact that, according to the Tax Justice Network, I believe it's 30% of personal wealth and 66% of corporate wealth is held offshore. Think about the Pulsechain tokens named in that lawsuit. Given that legal clarification, their potential value in a world where the Tax Justice Network says that anywhere from 15 to 30 trillion is sitting offshore. I've heard the uppermost estimate I've read about is 50 trillion. So potentially tens of trillions is sitting offshore. That's incredibly sensitive to legal jurisdiction laws. And it now has three entities that have been given not complete legal clarification, but increased legal clarification in relation to the whole rest of the industry. I mean, you went from no unicorns to potentially like three unicorns.
Yeah, and
it's crazy.
What's super interesting about that also is that if people will keep their assets on chain, there are third-party services where you can pay a third party to get you into cash overseas.
I guess we'll find out the exact results when they happen, but I think there's heavy speculation that this chain will do really it'll do fine. I'll just say that it'll do fine. I don't when people worry about are we going to get back to sac and whatever, blah, 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 blah. You know what? Everyone else's sacrifice is different. Some people paid, 4 zeros and a 3 for Pulse. Some people paid 4 zeros and a 7 for Pulse. Like, everyone's sacrifice is different. All you're hearing is people that have been down bad for a couple of years. It's starting to weigh heavy on them because they thought that, when they bought Hex at 50 cents, that it was going to keep going, and they were late. And so, they sacrificed thinking that, okay, well, this is going to be the next biggest thing if I'm not going to get this run up on Hex. And then, it just didn't happen the way that they had thought it would. And honestly, like, I don't see how you could when the founder was going through an SEC case. Also, with that closing up, now you have the Interpol stuff. So literally, there's like things being thrown at him that he can't help. So like that doesn't mean that we're not going to have a cycle of our own, and we're going to do really good throughout the bull cycle. It's just the timing is not what everyone thought. And actually, if you examine at the entire crypto market other than Bitcoin, there was no real luxurious run. Like, even, quote unquote blue chips, they haven't even hit their all-time highs yet. They might have gotten 75% of the way there, but other than that, they've been coasting along the same places price-wise they were in late 23. So that's what I mean. Like, this is a very timed event, in my opinion, because they were able to scale Bitcoin, make it seem like it's the safe play, make the cycle look like it's just about Bitcoin, and look at how amazing these returns are and such. But then there's going to be the time where, the accumulation for Ethereum is just going to happen, and there's going to be a lot of people that, at the end of the cycle, they're going to look and say, I could have gotten Ethereum for, even this year, you could have gotten Ethereum $1,200, $1,300, and what if that went to like 13,000 or like 17,000? Make you sick. I mean,
Or 30,000.
basically, or 30,000. Like it's on the same trajectory as Bitcoin. It might even price perform relatively even more so than Bitcoin's 2017 cycle. Everyone is like all gun ho about Bitcoin because it's done well, but it was by purpose. That was by choice. You have ETF inflows, you have Wall Street buying all the time, you have BlackRock buying all the time. It's basically is Wall Street. These institutions are accumulating. And so, like, when we had the events last year where, Mt. Gox, they're going to sell off all their coins. The FTX people, they got coins that are coming out due. And, the market front runs that news, and it tanks a little bit to make it seem like this is going to be a bad event. And it really wasn't that terrible. I mean, like, in perspective of like a chart, like Bitcoin has performed even in the most bearish times really extremely well. And, that lets you know that institutions really have a grip on Bitcoin now. So what do you think they're going to be chasing next? If you don't think it's Ethereum, I don't know what to tell you, and so by default, that is boosting us up. And then once people do want to go floating around in DeFi, Pulse Chain will be sitting right and pretty right there for them. Got the great marketing, got the great color schemes. We'll have meme coins. I'm sure Pulsex will have upgrades. I'm sure Pulse Chain is going to have a hot new narrative because of the green candles. I'm not sure where this money's going to come from.
Like, you have a chain that's very different. Most of these chains and even these other L1s that I'm seeing are coming out currently. It's the same old thing where it's a certain group of individuals that are distributing the coins into the environment. Whereas Pulse Chain, it was a full system state copy. And then on top of that, you've got regular clarity. Like, this is a different product from everything else out there. It has not been properly valued. Only time and through price discovery, which is massive volatility, will it be valued by people. I mean, that's why it's so funny. Everybody's out there crying over their bags. It's like, well, if you went all in if you didn't do proper risk management, you went all in at once and didn't do something as basic as DCA, like nobody's to blame but yourself. But you still have time. Look at the current prices on the chain.
We kind of want to get the retail people over here as well, because like, who knows, maybe Pulse Chain gets more of the retail adoption than people would assume, and maybe it's because the builders are more introducing stuff to people in a way that they like, which is yield, whether it's yield, whether it's security, whether it's whatever you want to name on Pulse Chain. You got a lot of builders, they're ambitious, and I think smaller guys that maybe they do invest in Dogecoin and that's it. They might get a little intrigued by that, because the more we go into the dawn of this crypto era, you're going to get more retail people interested in what people are doing. Yeah, you have your RH like LARPers, and then you have the people who like they make it their mission to try to like be the arch nemesis, because since they can't be the hero, like the next best thing is to be like the arch nemesis villain that everyone hates, but it's like attention, so they like it. I don't know. It's a weird dichotomy in Pulse Chain right
Well,
now.
there's enough revenue behind it that it matters to them. I mean, I don't know where that revenue is coming from, but there's enough revenue for it to matter. But in the scope of the chain, us talking on the internet probably is going to have absolutely nothing to do with what happens on the chain.
Yeah, at this point, it's about price discovery, or to a great extent, extraction. It's the rectards versus the Richards, and there's not many Richards out here, but there's plenty of rectards, and you see it in their insecurities as they project themselves through their tweets or through their content. It's pretty
I'm
funny.
happy. Most of them are going to be gone by sacrifice prices. Most of them are going to be gone. Watch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If they make it that long.
As soon as they get a glimpse of that 3 zeros and a 2, or maybe even a 3 zeros and a 4, they're going to go berserk. They're going to be so happy and sell, and their X accounts go stagnant. And then the next time we'll hear from them is when they bought the top again.
You have to be impressed by Pulse Chain, right? I mean, you think about it. Richard, I remember everybody was absolutely crying about their sacrificed funds in Pulse Chain, and you could see it in the communications at the time. And so after that, it went down for a bit, and then it hit was depending upon what you're looking at, the bottom or damn close to the bottom, and that was about the true bottom. And then we've been in probably the worst macro environment in 40 years. The worst macro environment in 40 years. The founder being chased by Interpol and the SEC, winning against the SEC. And from what I've seen in patterns by U.S. law enforcement entities in relation to foreign individuals, what's happening with him, or what happened with him in Finland is very consistent with the pattern U.S. law enforcement uses to put pressure on foreign individuals. So, when the SEC thing broke, I pretty much attributed that to a breaking of the Finland thing, and the Interpol thing. So in Finland, it was taxes. With Interpol, it's supposedly his fat white intellectual, knuckles contacted somebody in an elevator somewhere, and yet they haven't released the elevator footage, which they would have done within 24 hours. So, he's...
Yeah, I'm sure it's not real. I'm sure it's not.
Yeah. No, the U.S. government is...
I laugh at that. That's so funny, though. I try to imagine it.
The U.S. government is very consistent in how they go after people. And the U.S. government does a lot. It does an immense amount of good for individuals in the U.S. Gary Gensler did a lot of good things for investors in the U.S., but he was under political pressure, as was the DOJ, so on and so forth, in relation to cryptocurrencies, because it's a major outflow of funds from the U.S. Towards these other places that, like the Lazarus Group and so on and so forth. So it's an extraction point of funds away from the U.S., which is detrimental to the U.S. So, I understand that, but I think they did things wrong in relation to Richard, but only time will tell. Maybe Richard is the greatest con man in the history of the world. But I would say that when he won against the SEC, that pretty much put the stake in the heart of the Finland tax situation and the Interpol. Oh my God, he's the worst, assaulteur in the history of the world. So but those things will play out as they
Yeah.
should. If he did wrong, he'll be held accountable for it, I'm sure. But
Yeah, I think
that guy's,
we've got to
I,
remind ourselves, too, that we're about to enter into a bull market in which the majority of the people who are coming on chain will not know our history at all. All they're going to know is that they're going to bump into a chart with big green candles. The narrative is going to be completely
Yep.
different in 60 days. And so I think part of our narrative has to change because we've got all this knowledge of about how we've had to navigate 3 years of lawsuits and SEC justifications, how we've had to hang on mentally and why it made sense. None of those reasons are going to matter in 60 to 90 days. And we've got to take it easy on people who are here for the first time and try not to rehash these issues because they're not going to care.
well, I disagree.
Yeah.
Perspective on history is what gives a individual a sense of kind of calibration into the environment with which they're in. Because if you didn't know anything about the history of Richard or this situation, you didn't realize that if you didn't realize that Richard was one of the greatest educators in the history of cryptocurrencies, and then all you heard was, "Oh my God, he beat some adolescent in a elevator, and he's wanted for tax fraud." You'd have no perspective. You'd have no understanding of the total context of the situation. So it is beneficial to newer people to understand the historical context of everything in relation to the chain, in relation to Richard. What about, so they see p-hex. Did they know that e-hex was attacked by the Ethereum Foundation by changing the right to disk function? I mean, these things matter in the overall context of the investing environment because you don't understand the forces against you. You just see, oh my God, look at all this volatility. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, I mean, like we're gonna have a little bit of like that retail ignorance, but I think when they want to stick around and they understand, like, oh, I could park my yield here, oh, I could farm here, or whatever protocols out there that they like outside of whatever brought them there, like. I think they'll start doing their research and they'll really dig in to the community because like all these other communities out here are either AI ran or they're Cabal ran. I think Pulse Chain just solely going on like X, you could pop into a Pulse Chain space and by the end of it they would have all embraced you, unless you talk shit about them. If you've said anything that pretty much is free game, like you insult Richard, you insult the coins, you insult the network, the community members, all that's free game. You're getting jumped. But if you're playing it cool and you're curious, you're just asking questions, maybe you're hype about stuff, Pulse Chain will embrace you. So I have no issue in believing that we're going to retain whatever that traffic comes in, like regardless whether it's VC people, whether it's your average common folk. This is kind of the place where people like are really comfortable, like not only engaging with one another even though they're on totally different spectrums of wealth, but also too, like, there's this sentiment of like actual community where other networks just really don't have. And I would know, I mean, I've surfed around them, and like I said, it's either Cabal or AI.
Yeah, valid points from both of you. I completely agree. It'll be interesting to watch. I would like it to just happen. I'm tired of waiting around. Feels like it's been a long time.
I mean, it kind of has been a long time for some people. I mean, for myself, maybe like a year and a half, a little bit over that. But some people, it's been 4 years, going on 4 years or something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a long cycle, and it didn't play out like a lot of people thought it would have. Especially when I would say, like, when Bitcoin started getting bullish, everyone thought like there was going to be like this huge momentum of since Bitcoin's being embraced, everything's being embraced. And it's like, yes and no. Like there's times for that stuff. And I think a lot of us were just, kind of stuck in the moment of like, we like the fact that Bitcoin's being adopted and whatever. If you have Bitcoin, you've done really well. At the same time, though, We all like other leverage plays, whether it either gets us more Bitcoin, more Ethereum. Maybe we like holding the assets we're just in now. Whatever it is, I think most people are in altcoins outside of institutions, and they knew that. And I think they did what they did purposefully. And unless you're strong enough to survive it, they kind of accomplished what they wanted, which is to get all of you out before they decide to run up the price.
Yeah, you know what I've come to understand about a lot of people that initially got into whether it's eHex or the Pulsechain ecosystem, they were prompted by their understanding of digital assets. And that understanding was brought about by their mentor, primarily Richard Hart. So there was a entity, a beacon of understanding for them that allowed them to enter into the digital asset space with an understanding that they felt they weren't at such a disadvantage that they were going to be absolutely just destroyed. And so there was a level of confidence, a level of inspiration, if you will. And right now, what you see in the Pulsechain ecosystem, it's not inspiration. It's doom scrolling and guys, certain individuals that come in as whether they're just playing the part of the antagonist. It doesn't matter. The question is, are you espousing the original ideals of the individual that established the ecosystem? And from what I see, most people aren't. There are very few that are. And so, yes, maybe there's a certain percentage that's AI. There's a certain percentage that's what have you. But for those unique entities that are coming into the space seeking some aspect of benefit, that's where the educational aspect, the true genuine individual or true genuine entity has to be there. And so, it's a bit apathetic to say it's all AI and, scammers. There are real people out there in the world that are seeking solace for their wealth, which is a measure of their effort over time. And so, considering it's a privilege to have something like the U.S. currency, which in relation to most other currencies is a safe haven asset, to have something that's potentially even more beneficial, like a U.S. federal court recognized asset. That's huge. Something that has an upside to the U.S. dollar is huge, and a unique value proposition in relation to the U.S. dollar is huge. So I think there's a lot of things here, and that's all part of value discovery. I'm not knocking anybody. It's just that this is a process, and it's going to be really interesting to observe it as it evolves over time. So I think a person should be, not be dismissive of it.